Clarity, meditation, and emotions. This session looks at emotions and their impact on the thoughts we raise to consciousness during meditation. It also deals with how to deal with those emotions. Often we must set the thought aside and deal with the emotion because that emotion is what is hindering our desire to reach neutrality. The techniques used to deal with our thoughts do not work on emotions. Emotions provide us with important information about ourselves, our relationships with others, and our response to the world in general. Emotions make our lives rich with texture, providing an array of perspectives and reactions. We need to feel our emotions to acknowledge them and sometimes soothe and support them. I want to share a personal story with you. When I was a young woman, I had a disagreement with a man whom I admire. I no longer remember what the argument was about, but I do remember vividly the emotions. His tone was disappointed and slightly accusatory. I remember feeling shame and guilt. I guess he noticed how badly I felt because the next day he said, "You should not take it so hard. They are only words. They can't really hurt you." After he said that, part of me felt like he was saying my feelings were not important. Another part of me felt that I was being silly in feeling what I felt. I had not yet learned how to identify my own feelings, nor had I learned how to cope with those feelings. So that incident became tucked away in the back of my mind, and over time I tried to make sense of it. I no longer remember when I figured it out, but at some point I did. Sure, words in themselves are neutral, and we all choose to give them meaning. Part of that meaning is through the energy from the other person conveying that idea. So it was not only the words, but it was the tone and the energy that accompanied those words that had me feeling shame and guilt. Honestly, I don't know what he was feeling when he said those words. He didn't share that with me. But I guess that perhaps contempt was among what he was feeling. What I had picked up on was his disappointment, a judgment, an accusation, another judgment. His judgments fed into my own basic fear. You are not worthy. Then I proceeded to accept those judgments and feel guilt and shame. Please do not feel sorry for me or any animosity towards the man in this story. He gave me a gift, the gift of self-discovery. That one little incident led me on a journey of personal understanding and growth. Have you ever heard it said that pain can be a good thing because it provides information telling us there is something wrong with our body? One of the issues that makes diabetes so dangerous is because most people do not feel any pain and therefore rationalize that it cannot be that serious. In a similar manner, emotions give us information about our thoughts. This is a good thing because emotions provide us with the impetus to delve into ourself and to develop a life full of texture and vitality. Our thoughts, with the exception of judgments, are neutral. Emotions give intensity to our thoughts. Think of them as giving color, providing different hues, tones, and highlights. Similar to the three basic colors of red, green, and blue, there are two basic emotions, love and fear. From the three basic colors, combinations can produce orange, purple, pink, turquoise, etc., on and on. Underneath love is joy, contentment, gratitude, graciousness, and all the other positive emotions we feel. Under fear is hate, anger, guilt, shame, and the other negative feelings we feel. Emotions provide us with a rainbow that can be dazzling and energizing or dark and sober. We can group emotions into two types, positive and negative. Positive emotions make us feel good. Negative emotions, well, usually not so much. Positive emotions act on different parts of the brain than negative emotions, and different chemicals come into play. Positive emotions provide greater contentment and joy. Negative emotions place stress on our bodies and over time can have a negative impact on our health. They also have an impact on our thinking, beliefs, attitudes, and actions. When we enter a negative state, we see fewer ways of interpreting a situation and therefore have fewer options in our repertoire. When we are in a positive state, we are open to better problem solving. When we think any thought, even the simplest of thought, they may be accompanied by a whole array of different emotions. For example, if we were to look at a child, our brain could make a simple and neutral thought. This is a child. However, our emotions can be a whole different array. We could feel hope, despair, joy, longing. So it is like emotions color our thoughts. The colors can be pale and muted or intense and forceful. Sometimes we experience fear and love together. In this case, we feel conflicted and have not worked out what is at the bottom of our feelings. Conflicted emotions can generally be lined up with our conflicted thoughts. When this happens, it might be useful to look at the pros and cons of our thoughts, giving more weight to areas with greater consequences. For example, if a man is debating whether or not to punch another man who is flirting with his girlfriend, one of the cons could be that he could go to jail. This may be given a higher score than that his girlfriend may think less of him. The weighting provides greater information in developing a conclusion. Let's look at some emotions in more detail. Fear is the opposite to love, not hate. If you look underneath hate, you will find fear. Hate is a reaction that brings out our desire to defend ourselves. When someone disrespects or hurts us, we hate that person because underneath we fear what he or she can do to us. We fear their power over us, that they can ruin our reputation or get something that we want. We need to justify our desire to retaliate. Hate helps us to turn our fear into a response of verbal or physical fighting. If we do not take action, it makes us feel that we have the right to revenge when we feel unwilling or unable to act upon it. Joy, contentment, peace, compassion, graciousness, gratitude, empathy, generosity, all have love at their root. Resentment, anger, jealousy, guilt, shame are all rooted in fear. Blame is a judgment that is colored from the emotion of fear. It reflects our belief that we are innocent, but that person or other people caused the problems. Blame never accepts a personal role in the issue. Blame is different than responsibility, which comes from a neutral thinking process. Responsibility provides rational evidence of what was done and by whom. Blame is often used to deflect our responsibility unto others. In other words, we know we had a role in the situation, but do not want to own it. During meditation, the goal is to separate thoughts from emotions. That is to identify the thought and emotion that is linked to it, and then let go of that emotion, even if the emotion is a good one. Only through neutrality can we truly look at what we are thinking and decide if it is true, useful, and or in line with the person you want to be. After you have evaluated that thought, feel free to wallow in the positive emotions if they bring peace and joy, contentment, etc. For example, imagine you have a friendship with an individual who is powerful or popular or wealthy. When you thought of that person, you felt some form of gratification. However, perhaps that person was also cruel or manipulative or a taker? Well, by thinking about that person in a neutral manner, you can be more open to seeing whether or not that friendship is healthy and worthwhile. That is why sometimes even so-called positive emotions may be tinged by other things that are not as positive in the end. Sometimes we are not able to deal with the thought because of the intensity of the emotion. In this case, write down the thought and promise to come back to it. Deal with the emotion. Neutralize it, and then you will be ready to choose the best way to evaluate the thought. Being able to detach emotions from our thoughts takes a lot of practice. It does not come all at once. You will have some success and then slip back into old habits of thinking. Keep doing it, and eventually it will become automatic. Generally, negative emotions are particularly harmful to thoughts because fear keeps us from seeing situations and people as they truly are. Fear closes doors or leads us to reaping fewer rewards in life. Now, how to deal with your emotions, especially the negative types, is a 3-step process. The first step is to acknowledge the emotion. Own it. Sometimes we cannot even name the emotion. In this case, we may struggle to give it a name. Luckily, you can simply ask yourself, does this feel more like fear or like love? Over time, you will become more specific in naming that emotion and confirming the feeling is real. That is to say, it is important that you acknowledge that that feeling, whatever it is real and that you are entitled to feel what you feel. In your self-dialogue, you might want to confirm anyone would have been hurt by this. The better you are able to label the emotion, the more specific you can become about how and why this emotion affects you. The second step is to soothe. Provide yourself with words or ways of soothing those emotions. Some of our most painful emotions come from early childhood. Practice compassion towards the roots of that pain. However, that doesn't mean that you should allow yourself to permanently dwell in negative feelings. Even grief, after a while, can no longer be healing but rather disruptive to life. We have to move on from pain and suffering and start living. Part of soothing can be things like listening to music, spiritual reading, and of course, meditation. The third step in dealing with your feelings is to support them. Develop ways of easing away from the fear and replacing that fear with more positive thoughts and emotions that help you to move to love. Again, meditation is an appropriate tool in providing yourself with support in dealing with your emotions. I now want to spend a couple of minutes talking about 2 specific emotions, compassion and forgiveness. We each make mistakes and warrant forgiveness. When we forgive, be it forgiveness of others or of ourselves, we release ourselves from the drain that comes from not forgiving. Whatever we need to forgive, it is something that took place in the past. Leave that event in the past and live in the present. Let it go, and then you can move on. Forgiveness releases us from a burden that we really don't need to carry. Compassion is a feeling that means we open our hearts to the misfortune of others. It is about feeling sympathy and understanding and accepting that none of us are perfect. It is important that we feel compassion towards others as well as ourselves. Sometimes we can't feel compassion for others until we extend it to ourselves. Promoting the feeling of compassion opens us up to greater love of ourselves and other people and is a backdrop for the process of forgiving and letting go. I already talked about the shadow self, the part of ourself that we disown. Wrapped inside that part of us are emotions that are like a burden that weigh us down. As we face those emotions, it is a release of negative energy that we have been carrying. In time, we become more at peace with who we are, and our energy is lighter, more filled with peace and joy. Isn't that a worthwhile goal? In the lecture on the basics, I said that it would take about 28 days to develop the habit of meditating in a way that promotes lessening of stress and greater relaxation. However, by the time you get into neutralizing thoughts and emotions, the process takes much longer, and you can expect it to take anywhere between 100 days to a full year. I know that that sounds like a long time, but when you put it into long-term perspective, it's providing dividends that keep on growing and growing throughout your life, and well worth the investment. So I encourage you to try these techniques and put them into your daily routine to help you become a stronger and happier person.